Captain James Mitchell stood in the center of the great crystal chamber, his wrists locked in glowing energy shackles. The metal felt cold against his skin, but his face showed no fear. Around him, 12 alien judges sat on floating thrones that hummed with power. Their bodies looked like living glass, shifting between blue and purple colors as they spoke. Human James Mitchell, the center judge announced, his voice echoing through the chamber like breaking ice. You stand accused of destroying the Vorthak research station and killing 300 scientists. James lifted his chin slightly. I was saving my crew from your people's trap, Your Honor. They were going to dissect us alive. Angry whispers filled the chamber. The other aliens in the viewing area, creatures with too many arms, others that floated like jellyfish, some that looked like walking trees, all stared at him with hatred. To them, humans were new to the galaxy. Young. Dangerous. Silence. The head judge's crystal body flashed red. The research station was conducting legal experiments. Your violent response resulted in massive destruction. Legal? James laughed, a sound that made several aliens step back. You call kidnapping and torture legal? Maybe that's normal where you come from, but humans don't play that game. The judge on the left, smaller than the others, leaned forward. You destroyed an entire space station with a simple cargo ship. How is this possible? James shrugged, the chains rattling. Physics is physics. You put enough pressure on the right spot, anything breaks. Even your fancy crystal towers. More whispers. James noticed how the aliens looked at each other with worry. Good. They should be worried. The penalty for such crimes is usually death, the head judge continued. However, the Galactic Council has decided to show mercy. How generous, James said dryly. You will be exiled to Kepler 442c, the judge announced. A world where you can harm no one but yourself. The chamber erupted in excited chittering and clicking sounds. James had heard of that planet. Everyone in the galaxy called it a Deathworld. Acid rain, poisonous air, creatures that could eat through metal. Most species couldn't survive there for more than a few days. Interesting choice, James said calmly. Got a climate report on that place? Seasonal weather patterns? The judges looked confused. The head one tilted his crystal head. Do you not understand? This is a death sentence. No being has survived on that world for more than one rotation cycle. Yeah, I heard it's pretty rough, James nodded. But I'm curious, what kind of local wildlife am I looking at? Any apex predators I should know about? And please tell me you're giving me at least basic survival gear. Complete silence filled the chamber. The aliens stared at him like he was insane. They expected him to beg, to cry, to scream in terror. Instead, this human was asking practical questions like he was planning a camping trip. The small judge spoke up, his voice uncertain. You are not afraid. James looked around the chamber, taking in all the different alien faces watching him. Afraid? Listen, I grew up in the Australian outback. My dad used to drop me in the desert with nothing but a knife and a water bottle when I was 12. Called it character building. We do not understand your reference, the head judge said slowly. Australia's a continent on my homeworld, James explained patiently. Everything there tries to kill you. Spiders the size of dinner plates, snakes that can drop you in 30 seconds, crocodiles that haven't changed much in 200 million years. Oh, and jellyfish that can stop your heart just by touching you. The floating jellyfish-like aliens in the viewing area made disturbed sounds. And you survived this? Australia? Another judge asked. Thrived in it, James grinned. Learned to love it, actually. Nothing teaches you to appreciate life like having it threatened on a daily basis. The judges looked at each other in what James assumed was their version of concern. This wasn't going the way they planned. The sentence stands, the head judge declared, but his voice wavered slightly. You will be transported to Kepler 442c within one solar cycle. Do you have any final requests? Actually, yeah, James said, counting on his fingers. First, I'd like a decent multi-tool if you have one. Second, maybe some basic medical supplies, nothing fancy, just antiseptic and bandages. Third, is there any way I could get a copy of whatever survey data you have on the planet? Topographical maps, mineral surveys, that kind of thing. The aliens looked increasingly uncomfortable. This human was treating his death sentence like a business transaction. Oh, and one more thing, James added cheerfully. Any chance you could drop me near a water source? I mean, I can find water pretty much anywhere, but it would save me some time. The head judge's crystal body flickered rapidly between colors. These These are unusual requests for someone facing certain death. Look at it this way, James said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Either I die quickly and you're rid of me, or I don't die and maybe I learn something useful. Win-win, right? The chamber fell silent again. Finally, the head judge spoke. Your requests will be considered. Guards, remove the prisoner. As the energy shackles began pulling him toward the exit, James called back over his shoulder, "Oh, and thanks for the adventure. It's been a while since I had a real challenge." The last thing he heard before the doors closed was confused alien chittering and the sound of crystal judges trying to figure out what they had just unleashed. The drop pod screamed through the poisonous atmosphere of Kepler 442c like a falling star. Inside, James Mitchell gripped the safety harness as red warning lights flashed around him. The automated voice kept repeating atmospheric toxicity critical and radiation levels fatal, in 3 different alien languages. James checked his basic rebreather mask one more time. The aliens had actually given him decent gear, probably feeling guilty about the whole death sentence thing. A basic survival kit, water purification tablets, and emergency rations for 2 weeks. Not bad for a farewell gift. The pod slammed into the red sand with enough force to rattle his teeth. Steam hissed from the heat shields as the door blew open. James stepped out into what the aliens called the Crimson Wastes and immediately understood why they considered this place hell. The sky was the color of dried blood, with 2 suns beating down mercilessly. The sand beneath his boots shifted and moved like it was alive. In the distance, something the size of a subway train burrowed through the dunes, leaving a wake of disturbed earth behind it. The air tasted of metal and sulfur even through his filter mask. James pulled out a small device from his kit and checked the readings. Radiation levels that would cook most aliens in hours. Atmospheric pressure that would make breathing impossible without gear. Temperature swings that could freeze him at night and bake him during the day. Yep, he said to himself, shouldering his pack. Just like home. The first thing James did was climb the nearest ridge to get a better view. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, red sand dunes, twisted metal spires that might have been ancient structures, and dark spots that looked like cave systems. Best of all, he could see the glint of water about 5 miles east. As he studied the terrain, something growled behind him. James turned slowly to find 6 creatures the size of wolves watching him from 30 feet away. They looked like hairless dogs crossed with razor blades, all sharp teeth and claws, with thick gray hide that seemed to repel the harsh sunlight. Their eyes glowed yellow in the dim light. "Well, hello there," James said calmly, keeping his hands visible. "You boys the local welcoming committee?" The pack leader stepped forward, lips pulled back to show teeth like broken glass. Its nose twitched as it tried to figure out what this strange new smell was. James reached slowly into his pack and pulled out one of his emergency ration bars. He broke off a piece and tossed it halfway between them. "Peace offering?" The leader sniffed the food suspiciously, then gulped it down. Its tail gave a small wag. The other pack members moved closer, their aggressive postures relaxing slightly. "Thought so," James grinned. "You're just hungry, aren't you?" For the next hour, James shared half his rations with the pack. By the time he was ready to move on, the creatures were following him like oversized puppies. He named the leader Spike because of the bone ridge along its back. The journey to the water source took 3 days. James learned quickly that the planet had its own rhythm. During the day, the heat was unbearable, but the sandworms stayed deep underground. At night, the temperature dropped below freezing, but that's when the real predators came out to hunt. On his second night, James woke to find Spike and his pack arranged in a protective circle around his small shelter. Something massive had walked past in the darkness, leaving footprints the size of dinner plates just 10 feet away. "Thanks, boys," James whispered, scratching Spike behind what might have been ears. "I owe you one." When he finally reached the water source, James discovered it was more than just a spring. It was an oasis built around the wreckage of an ancient starship. The ship had crashed so long ago that plants had grown through its hull, creating a small ecosystem. The water was clean, filtered through layers of alien technology that still worked after who knows how many centuries. James set up his first real camp in the shadow of the crashed ship. Using pieces of metal from the wreck, he built a solar still to collect extra water. The alien technology was fascinating. Power sources that still held a charge, materials that conducted heat in impossible ways. "This isn't a Deathworld," he said to Spike, who was sunning himself on a warm piece of hull plating. "This is a hardware store." By the end of his first week, James had accomplished several things that would have amazed the aliens monitoring him from orbit. He'd established a base camp with reliable water. He'd befriended the local predators instead of fighting them. He'd figured out how to use pieces of the crashed ship to improve his shelter and tools. Most importantly, he'd started to understand the planet's ecosystem. The day creatures were territorial but not particularly aggressive. The night hunters were dangerous but avoided fire. The sandworms were actually beneficial. They aerated the soil and their tunnels created underground passages that could be useful. As he sat by his campfire on the seventh night, sharing the last of his rations with his new pack, James looked up at the alien constellations and smiled. Somewhere up there, aliens were watching him through their surveillance equipment, waiting for him to die. "Sorry to disappoint you," he said to the stars. "But I'm just getting started." Spike made a contented rumbling sound and curled up closer to the fire. In the distance, one of the massive sandworms surfaced briefly, its scales catching the firelight before it disappeared back into the dunes. James reached for his makeshift journal and began writing his observations about the local wildlife. Tomorrow, he planned to explore those cave systems he'd spotted from the ridge. 3 months on Kepler 442c had changed James Mitchell in ways the watching aliens couldn't understand. His skin was darker from the twin suns, his muscles harder from constant work, and his eyes sharper from watching for danger. But the biggest change was in how he moved through this deadly world, like he belonged here. The seasonal storms had arrived right on schedule, just like the old ship's computer had warned him. James stood at the entrance of his underground bunker, watching the sky turn black with clouds that sparked with green lightning. The wind howled across the wasteland, carrying spores that could eat through metal in minutes. "Here we go, boys," he said to Spike in the pack, who had learned to recognize the signs of the killing storms. They retreated deeper into the tunnels James had carved out beneath the crashed ship. The orbital surveillance team huddled around their screens, certain they were about to witness the humans' final moments. The spore storms had never left anything alive on the surface. They watched their instruments show wind speeds that could flip aircraft and radiation levels that would kill most species instantly. But James wasn't on the surface anymore. His bunker stretched deep into the rock beneath the oasis, carved out over weeks of careful digging. He'd used the crashed ship's hull plating to reinforce the walls and its still-functioning power cells to run air filters and heating systems. The main chamber was large enough for him and his pack, with storage rooms branching off like the roots of a tree. James had learned to read the planet's moods. The spore storms came every few weeks, lasting exactly 17 hours. During those times, he worked on his projects by the light of salvaged alien technology. He built a workshop where he crafted tools from ship wreckage and bone. His hydroponic garden grew earth vegetables he'd adapted using spores from the local plants, tomatoes that could survive in toxic soil, potatoes that absorbed radiation and converted it to energy. When the storms passed, James emerged wearing something that made the monitoring aliens question their instruments. His biosuit was crafted from the hides of creatures he'd somehow killed, the thick scales of a ridge runner for the torso, the flexible leather of tunnel crawlers for the joints, and the transparent membrane of a skydrifter for the helmet visor. The suit shouldn't exist. Those creatures were apex predators that even other apex predators avoided. "Computer, play something cheerful," James said to the ship's AI as he checked his equipment. The ancient system had become his companion over the months, its database full of information about the planet's history and the civilization that once lived here. Music echoed through the bunker, something the original aliens had listened to, all crystalline chimes and harmonic resonance. James hummed along as he prepared for his daily surface patrol. The landscape after a spore storm was always different. New formations of crystal grew where the spores had settled. Plants mutated into strange new shapes. And sometimes, ships crashed. James was checking his trap lines. He'd learned which creatures were edible and which ones made good material for tools, when he spotted the smoke rising from beyond the eastern ridge. Another crash, but this one was recent. Still burning. Spike whined softly, sensing his humans' tension. The pack had grown to 12 members now, all of them following James with the loyalty of dogs who'd found their alpha. "I know, boy," James said, scratching behind Spike's armored head. "Might be trouble. But might be someone who needs help." The crashed ship was small, designed for exploration rather than combat. James could tell from the hull design that it was from the same species that had exiled him, the crystal beings who called themselves the Vorthak. The pilot was still alive but barely, his transparent body flickering between colors that James had learned meant pain and fear. The alien's eyes widened when he saw James approaching. He tried to speak, but only managed a weak crackling sound like breaking glass. "Easy there," James said, kneeling beside the wreckage. "Let me guess, your people told you humans were dangerous monsters, right?" The Vorthak pilot managed a faint nod. James began pulling medical supplies from his pack, not the basic human kit he'd arrived with, but an improved version he'd built using local materials. Well, they weren't wrong about the dangerous part. But monster? That depends on how you treat me. For the next 2 weeks, James nursed the alien back to health in his bunker. The Vorthak, who said his name translated to clear sky after storm, was amazed by what the human had built. The underground complex was more sophisticated than many space stations he'd visited. Your people said no one could survive here, Clear Sky whispered in his crystalline language that James had partly learned from the ship's computer. Your people say a lot of things, James replied, stirring a pot of stew made from local plants and meat. Doesn't make them true. Clear Sky watched James work with tools that shouldn't exist, wearing armor made from creatures that shouldn't be killable, living comfortably in a place that should be instant death. The human had even taught several of the local predators to sit and stay like pets. When the rescue ship arrived, following Clear Sky's emergency beacon, the Vorthak insisted on repaying his debt. James asked for seeds from their agricultural worlds, medical supplies, and technical manuals. But mostly, James said as Clear Sky prepared to leave, tell your people what you saw here. Tell them exactly what humans can do when you give us a challenge. As the rescue ship departed, James stood in his biosuit watching it disappear into the toxic sky. Spike nuzzled against his leg, and the rest of the pack gathered around their strange human alpha. What do you think, boys? James asked, looking out over the deadly landscape that had become his home. Should we check out those deep caves tomorrow? The pack made their rumbling approval sounds, ready to follow him anywhere. Even into the heart of hell itself. 1 year on Kepler 442c had turned James Mitchell into something the galaxy had never seen before, a human who didn't just survive on a Deathworld, but thrived on it. His hair had grown long and wild, his skin was marked with scars that told stories of battles with creatures that had no names in any galactic language. But his eyes still held that spark of curiosity that made him human. The deep caves had been calling to him for months. Every expedition into the tunnel systems beneath his oasis revealed new passages, new mysteries. The planet's original inhabitants had built extensively underground, and James wanted to know why. His pack had grown again. 23 of the Razorwolves now followed him, along with 3 of the massive tunnel crawlers he'd somehow convinced to join his strange family. The aliens monitoring from orbit had stopped trying to explain what they were seeing. Their reports simply said human continues to exist because nothing else made sense. James was exploring the deepest level he'd found yet, following passages that led toward the planet's volcanic core, when he heard the sound. Voices. Not human voices, not the crystalline chiming of the Vorthak, but something else entirely. Something afraid. Stay quiet, boys, James whispered to his pack. Spike's ears flattened against his head, sensing danger ahead. The passage opened into a vast cavern lit by pools of lava. The heat was intense even through James's biosuit, but what caught his attention wasn't the volcanic activity. It was the settlement clinging to the far wall, rough shelters carved from rock, connected by rope bridges that swayed dangerously over the molten stone below. And everywhere, creatures that looked like a cross between lizards and humans, their scales dull with malnutrition and fear. James watched from the shadows as something massive moved in the lava pools. A predator the size of a bus surfaced briefly, its hide like molten rock, its eyes glowing white-hot. The lizard people, James decided to call them that until he learned their real name, huddled deeper in their shelters as the creature's roar shook the cavern. Fire dragons, James muttered, recognizing the species from the crashed ship's database. No wonder they're hiding. One of the lizard people was too slow reaching safety. The fire dragon's head shot up from the lava, jaws opening to reveal teeth like burning coals. James was moving before he could think about it. He burst from cover, his pack following in a coordinated rush that sent the fire dragon's attention away from its intended prey. James had fought these creatures before, but never one this large. His spear, crafted from ship metal and tipped with the hardest scale he'd ever found, struck the beast between its armored plates. The fire dragon's scream of pain and rage echoed through the cavern. It turned its full attention on this small creature that dared challenge it. James rolled aside as jaws snapped shut where he'd been standing, the heat singeing his suit even at a distance. Spike and the pack attacked in waves, their tactics perfected through months of hunting together. They couldn't hurt the fire dragon seriously, but they could distract it, worry it, make it focus on multiple threats at once. James climbed higher on the cavern wall, looking for the weak spot every predator had. There, where the neck met the skull, a gap in the armor just wide enough for his spear. He took aim and threw with all his strength. The spear punched through scale and bone, finding the brain beneath. The fire dragon's roar cut off abruptly as it crashed back into the lava, sending up gouts of molten rock that hissed against the cavern walls. Silence fell over the chamber except for the bubble and pop of cooling lava. James looked up to find dozens of yellow reptilian eyes staring at him from the shelters. The lizard people had never seen anything like this, a surface dweller who fought fire dragons and won. "Well," James said, pulling off his helmet and running a hand through his wild hair. That was exciting. The eldest of the lizard people, James could tell by the intricate scarring on his scales, climbed down from the highest shelter. He moved with the careful dignity of someone very old and very tired. "Surface Walker," the elder said in a voice like grinding stone. "Why do you help the Scarix?" So that's what they called themselves. James stored the information away as he studied the elder. The Scarix were clearly struggling, their tools were primitive, their shelters barely adequate, their bodies showing signs of chronic malnutrition. "Because you needed help," James said simply. "And that thing was going to eat one of you." The elder's head tilted in confusion. "You risk death for strangers?" "Where I come from, we have a saying," James replied, gesturing for his pack to stand down as more Scarix emerged from hiding. "We're all in this together." Over the following weeks, James found himself becoming something between a technical advisor and a protective older brother to the entire tribe. The Scarix had been barely surviving in these caves for generations, hiding from the fire dragons and scraping out an existence on whatever they could forage from the lava tubes. James changed that. He showed them how to use the volcanic heat for metalworking, turning crude stone tools into proper bronze implements. He taught them his water filtration techniques, giving them access to clean drinking water for the first time in living memory. Most importantly, he helped them understand the fire dragon's behavior patterns, when they hunted, where they nested, how to avoid them. "Your pack," the elder, whose name was Korath, observed one evening as they shared a meal of roasted cavefish. "They follow you as our young follow their clutch leaders." James looked at Spike, who was teaching a group of young Scarix the proper way to hunt tunnel rats. "We take care of each other," he said. "That's what family does." "Family," Korath repeated the human word slowly. "Yes. The Scarix understand family." By the end of the month, James had not only earned the Scarix's trust but their deep respect. They shared their knowledge of the deep cave systems, routes that led to parts of the planet even the orbital surveys had never mapped. "There are places deeper still," Korath told him, his old eyes glowing with reflected firelight. "Places where the first Scarix found things that should not be. Places where the old ones left warnings." James felt that familiar spark of curiosity ignite in his chest. What kind of warnings? Korath's scarred face showed what might have been a smile. "The kind that humans ignore, I think." Looking around at his expanded family, his pack of razor wolves, the Scarix children learning to use proper tools, the tunnel crawlers that had become surprisingly effective guard animals, James couldn't help but grin back. "You know me pretty well already, don't you?" The old Scarix clicked his tongue in amusement. "Surface Walker, I think we are only beginning to know you." 2 years had passed since James Mitchell was exiled to what the galaxy called a Deathworld. The Galactic Council's exploration fleet approached Kepler 442c with the solemn duty of documenting another failed attempt at survival. They expected to find bones, maybe some scattered equipment, and certainly no signs of life. Admiral Vextar, a tall insectoid creature with 4 arms and compound eyes, stood on the bridge of the flagship studying the planet below. "Begin scanning for remains," he ordered his science team. "We need to catalog whatever is left for the official report." "Sir," the sensor operator's voice was confused. "I'm picking up multiple settlements. And, sir, there are artificial structures. Large ones." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Check your instruments. Nothing survives on that planet." But the scans were accurate. Built into the cliffsides of what used to be called the Crimson Wastes, a small city spread across multiple levels. Gardens grew on terraces carved from living rock. Water systems channeled streams through the settlement. Most impossible of all, the energy readings showed a thriving population. "Prepare a landing party," Admiral Vextar ordered, his voice tight with disbelief. "We're going down there." The shuttle touched down on a landing pad that definitely hadn't existed 2 years ago. As the doors opened, the landing party stepped out wearing full environmental suits, expecting toxic air and deadly radiation. Instead, they were greeted by a figure that made them question their instruments all over again. James Mitchell stood before them wearing armor that seemed to be crafted from the scales and hides of creatures that shouldn't be killable. His weapons were a mix of alien technology and materials that didn't appear in any galactic database. Behind him stood a pack of the local predators, tame as house pets, along with several lizard-like beings the aliens didn't recognize. "Welcome to New Haven," James said cheerfully, pulling off a helmet made from what looked like crystallized fire dragon skull. "You're just in time for lunch. Hope you brought an appetite." Admiral Vextar's translator struggled with the human's casual tone. You are James Mitchell? The human who was exiled here?" "That's me," James nodded, then gestured toward the impressive settlement behind him. "And these are my neighbors. The Scarix, the Vorthak colonists who decided to stay, a few Keth traders who liked the area, and of course my original pack." He scratched behind Spike's ears. The Razor Wolf had grown larger over the years, his scales now scarred from countless battles, but his loyalty to the human absolute. "This is impossible," the science officer whispered. "The atmospheric readings show toxicity levels that should kill anything within hours." "Oh, it's pretty rough when you first arrive," James agreed. "But you adapt. Speaking of which, you might want to step back a bit. The locals get excited when they see new ships." As if summoned by his words, movement erupted from the rocks around the landing pad. Creatures the size of small buildings scuttled out from hidden caves, massive spider-like things with acid for blood and mandibles that could cut through starship hull. The landing party screamed and reached for their weapons, but James was already moving. He casually picked up what appeared to be a jury-rigged plasma rifle from a nearby rack and began firing with the practiced efficiency of someone doing routine maintenance. The spider creatures, James had nicknamed them puppies after the first few months, dropped one by one, their acidic blood hissing harmlessly on the specially treated ground. The whole engagement took less than 30 seconds. "Sorry about that," James said, setting the weapon back on its rack. "They're usually better behaved, but new visitors always get them worked up. Territorial instincts, you know?" The Admiral stared at the smoking remains of creatures that were listed in galactic databases as extinction-level threats. James had just dispatched 6 of them like he was swatting flies. You killed them so easily," one of the scientists managed. "Well, you learned their weak points after a while," James shrugged. "Plus, this rifle uses their own venom as ammunition. Poetic justice, really." A young Scarix came running up to James, chittering excitedly in his own language. James listened, then nodded and replied in the same tongue. The alien child scampered off happily. What did he want? Admiral Vextar asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming his shock. "Dinner's ready," James translated. "The elders want to meet you properly. They're curious about the outside galaxy." As they walked through the settlement, the landing party saw things that challenged everything they thought they knew about survival. Scarix children played with creatures that were classified as apex predators. Gardens grew using soil that should have been sterile poison. Technology that shouldn't work in this environment functioned perfectly. "How?" the Admiral finally asked. "How is any of this possible?" James paused at an overlook that showed the full scope of his settlement, hundreds of beings from multiple species living and working together in a place that was supposed to be uninhabitable. "You want the truth?" James asked. "Your people looked at this world and saw death. You saw everything that could kill you. But I looked at it and saw opportunity. Every challenge was a puzzle to solve. Every predator was a potential ally if you understood it right. Every toxic element was a resource waiting to be properly used." He pointed to a group of Scarix working with modified fire dragons. The massive creatures now wore harnesses and helped with heavy construction work. "You called this a death world because you were afraid of it. But fear is just excitement without breath, as we say on Earth. Once you stop being afraid and start being curious, amazing things happen." The Admiral watched a Vorthak child riding on the back of one of James's tunnel crawlers, laughing as the creature gently carried her around the settlement. "The Council will want to negotiate," he said quietly. "Official recognition, trade agreements, formal contact." "I figured they might," James nodded. "I've got some terms drawn up. Nothing too complicated, recognition of New Haven as an independent colony, trade rights for all species living here, and an official apology for the whole exile thing." He paused, then added with a grin that had learned to find humor in impossible situations, "Oh, and I'd appreciate it if you'd stop calling this place a death world. It's got personality, sure, but look at that sunset." The twin suns were setting behind the volcanic peaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that were actually beautiful once you stopped expecting them to kill you. "Besides," James continued, watching his diverse community prepare for another peaceful evening, "I've got a planet to run now. And there are still some really interesting cave systems I haven't fully explored yet." The Admiral realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history, not just human survival, but human triumph over the impossible. And somehow, that seemed very human indeed.